What's good YouTube? Today's video is going to be a Devastation Evoker guide for Dragonflight. We're going to cover everything for the Devastation Evoker from talents to tier sets, rotation, stat priority and consumables, and also any macros that you might want to use. Then at the end of the video I'll also go over my overall thoughts on this spec. So if this video does help you out then please feel free to drop a like down below and also subscribe to your boy. But let's crack on with the guide. For the Devoker I'll be going over a build that will work well for raiding and then another build that will work well for Mythic Plus or AoE fights. This first build is your standard raid build with the Feed the Flames talent. The aim of the build is to be well rounded, but for pure single target encounters you can swap out Eternity Span and Charge Blast for Titanic Wrath. For the class talent tree then, we're going to start up the top with Landslide, a 30-second mass AoE route on a 1.5 minute cooldown, but damage may break this effect. The main reason we're taking this though is to come down this left side of the tree where we're going to start with Natural Convergence, causing Disintegrate to channel 20% faster. In the middle, we're going to take our main defensive in Obsidian Scales, reducing the damage we take by 30% and it lasts 12 seconds. And then we're further going to buff up this defensive with Obsidian Bulwark, just granting us an additional charge for Obsidian Scales. In the middle then, we're going to take Permeating Chill, which is going to make our damaging blue spells reduce the target's movement speed by 50% for 3 seconds. On the right, which is more of our utility side of the tree, we're first going to take Expunge, removing any poison effects from allies. We're then going to come down to Verdant Embrace, flying to an ally and healing them, or you can use this on yourself and heal for the same amount. We're then going to come down to Scarlet Adaptation, causing 20% of our effective healing to be stored up, and then when we use our next Living Flame, it's going to consume all the stored healing to increase its damage dealt. Some nice passive damage here, so we're not going to complain. Across from here then, we're going to take Enkindled, just increasing the damage and healing by Living Flame by 6%. Over on the left, we're going to take our Interrupt as an evoker called Quell. This is on a 40-second cooldown, but we can use some talents in the spec tree to actually reduce this cooldown. And then after that, we're going to come down and take Instinctive Arcana, increasing our magic damage done by 4%. In the middle, we're going to take one of our main minor cooldowns called Tip the Scales, and this is basically just going to make our next empowered spell instantly cast and use it at its maximum empower level as well. Very nice for some upfront burst. Coming down the left then, we're going to take 2 points in Draconic Legacy, increasing our stamina by 4%, and then 2 points in Blast Furnace as well, to make the dot of Fire Breath last 4 seconds longer. We then come down and take Protracted Talons, which is just going to cause our Azure Strike to damage one additional enemy. And finally, down on the left, we're going to come and take Leaping Flames, causing our next Living Flame after we Fire Breath to strike one additional target per empower level used on the Fire Breath. Back up in the middle then, we're going to take Inherent Resistance, reducing the magic damage we take by 4%. Come down and put 1 point in Source of Magic, causing us to give a small percent of mana to our targeted healer whenever we cast an empowered spell. However, next we're going to put a point in Regenerative Magic, so the healer that we've targeted with our Source of Magic is now going to heal us for 15% of their healing whenever we are below 50% health. 1 point in Aerial Mastery just to increase the charges of Hover to 2 charges. Then we're further going to buff up our Hover ability with 2 points in Extended Flight, causing it to last 4 seconds longer. 1 point in Panacea. Whenever we cast Emerald Blossom, it's going to instantly heal us. Down here, we're going to take Rescue. I've been using this to troll a lot, but it is actually very useful. You target the player you want to rescue and then use this ability and click on the floor where you want to take them to. You will dash to them and then fly away with them and you will both hopefully be safe. Another minor defensive, we're going to take Renewing Blaze over here. Whenever we activate this effect, 100% of the damage we take is going to be healed back over 8 seconds. And then we're going to reduce the cooldown here by 30 seconds with Fire Within. Finally, a big cooldown that the Evoker has is Zephyr. A 2-minute cooldown that's going to lift us and 4 nearest allies within 20 yards up in the air, reducing our damage taken by 20% from area of effect attacks, but also increasing our movement speed by 30% for 8 seconds. A huge raid or party cooldown, so you definitely want to be putting a point in this. Over to the spec tree then, we have the red side of the tree on the left, which is going to be more based on AoE abilities. And then on the right, we have our blue side of the tree, which is going to be focused more so on our single target abilities. However, there is a nice bit of crossover here and there. So first, we will start with Pyre, an instant cast ability that's going to cost 2 essences, that's going to deal damage to the target but also splash to nearby enemies. We're then going to come down and take Ruby Essence Burst, causing our Living Flame to have a 20% chance to cause an Essence Burst, making our next Disintegrate or Pyre cost no essence. After that, 1 point in Dense Energy, reducing the essence cost of Pyre by 1. In the middle here for raid, we're going to take Inner Radiance, our Living Flame and Emerald Blossom are 30% more effective on ourselves. And then coming back up the top, we're going to take Azure Essence Burst. Whenever we Azure Strike, it has a 15% chance to cause an Essence Burst, again making our next Disintegrate or Pyre cost no Essence. Our first empowered spell then is going to be Eternity Surge, dealing some Spell Frost damage to the enemy, but the further we empower this ability, the more enemies this is going to hit. Over on the left then, we're going to take Power Nexus, increasing our maximum Essence to 6, and in the middle, we're going to take our main cooldown called Dragon Rage. When we use this ability, it's going to fire out 3 pyres at enemies within 25 yards, so some big burst AoE damage on demand as soon as you press this ability, but also for the next 14 seconds, Essence Burst is going to have a 100% chance to occur, and also we are always going to be gaining the maximum benefit of our Mastery, regardless of the target's health. Over on the right then, we're going to put 2 points in Arcane Intensity, increasing the damage dealt by 16% by Disintegrate. Another choice node over here, which we're going to stick 1 point in Engulfing Blaze, increasing the damage dealt by Living Flame and also the healing, but the cast time is increased by 0.5 seconds. In the middle, we're going to put 1 point in Animosity. During our Dragon Rage cooldown, whenever we cast an empowered spell, it's going to extend the duration of our Dragon Rage by 6 seconds. Again, on the right, we're going to put 1 point in Essence Attunement, which allows our Essence Burst buff to stack up to 2 times. Then 2 points in Heatwave, increasing the damage dealt by Fire Breath by 40%. 1 point in Eternity Span, causing our Eternity Surge, but also our Shattering Star, if we're talented, to hit twice as many targets. 1 point in Causality. Whenever we use an Essence ability, it is going to reduce the remaining cooldown of Eternity Surge by 1 second. Speaking of Shattering Star, we're going to put 1 point in here to damage 2 enemies with Spell Frost damage, but mainly increases the damage they take from us by 20% for 6 seconds. 1 point in Charge Blast. Whenever we use a blue ability, it's going to increase the damage of our next pyre by 5%, and this stacks up to 20 times. In the middle, 1 point in Tyranny. During Deep Breath and Dragon Rage, we gain the maximum benefit from our Mastery regardless of the target's health. Basically, this means that we want to try and delay these abilities until the targets are lower health, as long as we don't lose a usage of these cooldowns. To the left, we're going to put 1 point in Catalyze. While channeling our Disintegrate, our Fire Breath on the target deals damage 100% more often. 1 point in Font of Magic, increasing the maximum level of our Empower spells by 1. And then we're going to increase our Crit Strike damage by 230% instead of the usual 200% with 1 point in Spellweaver's Dominance. On this choice node, we're going to be choosing Focusing Iris, just making the damage taken effect from Shattering Star last 2 seconds longer. For some nice cleave, we're going to put 2 points in Scintillation. When our Disintegrate deals damage, it has a 15% chance to launch a level 1 Eternity Surge at 60% power. Over here, we're going to put 2 points in Burnout. Fire Breath damage has a 16% chance to cause our next Living Flame to be instant cast, and this stacks up to 2 times. 1 point in Hoarded Power at the bottom. When we consume an Essence Burst, it actually has a 20% chance not to be consumed. And finally, we're going to put 1 point in Feed the Flames, one of the defining talents in this build. Whenever we consume an Essence Burst, it's going to reduce the remaining cooldown of Fire Breath by 2 seconds. So this is going to be our general raid build. There's not too many pure single target fights in the Vault of Incarnates, but for instance on Teros, what I would recommend is taking 1 point out of Charge Blast and also Eternity Span, and then whacking those 2 points in Titanic Wrath, and after that building the same down the bottom. For Mythic Plus then, the Devastation Evoker has a lot of options on the class and spec tree, although the core talents do remain the same. This build will focus on Pyre as the main spender in AoE, while still using Disintegrate with the Scintillation talent to cleave higher health targets down. So for the class tree then, I'll go over the changes for the talents that we will use for Mythic Plus. First, we're going to put 1 point in Clobbering Sweep, reducing the cooldown of Tail Swipe by 45 seconds. We're then also going to put a point in Cauterizing Flame. This is a really nice dispel on a 1 minute cooldown, but it does have the benefit of being the only ability in the game that can actually dispel bleed effects, unless of course you are a dwarf. But it also does a small heal whenever you remove an effect. We're then going to put a point in Oppressing Roar, increasing the duration of crowd controls that affect these targets by 50% in the next 10 seconds. This is especially nice for AoE silences or stuns, for example the Sigil of Silence from the Vengeance Demon Hunter. So as long as you have a bit of coordination in your group, this ability is crazy strong. I will mention as well, on Raging Weeks you may also want to put at 1 point in Overawe, because then this ability also becomes an AoE Soothe, but the cooldown is also reduced for each enraged dispelled, so if you do it on AoE packs, it pretty much has no cooldown and you can do it on every single pack. Another change then is we're going to come down and put 1 point in Terror of the Skies. Whenever we use Deep Breath, it also stuns all the enemies for 3 seconds. Obviously huge for Mythic Plus, the more AoE CC you have, the better, and now this is also tied to one of your main cooldowns. So that is it as far as the changes go for the class tree. I would recommend you have a play with it because it's obviously going to depend on affixes, etc. But as a general rule, this is a very nice class talent build for the Devastation Evoker. Over to the spec specific tree then, we're first going to put 1 point in Imposing Presence, reducing the cooldown of our interrupt by 20 seconds. We all know how important kicks are in Mythic Plus, so this is very handy. We then put 2 points in Volatility, causing our pyre to have a 30% chance to flare up and explode again on a nearby target. And then the only other change in this build is we're going to put 1 point in Onyx Legacy, reducing the cooldown of Deep Breath by 1 minute. This makes Deep Breath a 1 minute cooldown that does a lot of AoE damage, but also AoE stuns as well with the Terror of the Skies talent. So this is a very valuable talent point in the spec specific tree. So this build here will be your go-to for most Mythic Plus dungeons or AoE encounters. However, in high fortified keys, you could run a build similar to this. You will lose a lot of single target damage for this, so I generally don't recommend this build. But if you are consistently doing very large pulls, and your boss damage doesn't really matter, then you could always run this for AoE memes. We'd put 1 point in Firestorm, a targeted AoE on the ground that deals damage over time to all enemies in the vicinity. And then we also put 1 point in Snapfire that gives our Living Flame a 12% chance to reset the cooldown of Firestorm and make our next one instant cast, but also deal 40% increased damage. In this build, we also put 2 points in Lay Waste, increasing the damage of Deep Breath by 30%. And finally, we put 2 points in Titanic Wrath, making our Essence Burst increase the damage of all affected spells by 15%. So I do just want to reiterate that this build would be for massive AoE pulls that are consistent across the dungeon. Otherwise, in Mythic Plus, I would generally recommend this as your go-to. That is pretty much it as far as talents go, so let's move on to the tier set. For Devastation Evokers, our set bonus revolves around our empowered spells. This increases the value of empowered cast, which are already our highest priority spells, so it's not really going to change anything too much rotation-wise. Our 2 set is going to increase our crit chance with empower spells by 5%, which in turn then causes our empower spells to increase our overall crit chance by 5% for 6 seconds. Our 4 set is a bit more interactive and fun, in which whenever you cast an empowered spell, it has a 25% chance to grant us 6 seconds of Fury of the Aspects, also known as Lust, without causing Sated. If this does proc already during your Lust, it will simply just extend the duration. Onto the rotation then, in the simplest terms, Devastation Evoker primarily deals damage by applying Fire Breath to deal damage over time, spending Essence and Essence Burst on Disintegrate, and casting Living Flame as a filler. Dragon Rage is the primary cooldown, and Eternity Surge is a short cooldown that deals heavy damage, increasing in targets as you empower it. This first opener for single target assumes you will be using the build I have suggested in this guide. First, you'll start off by pre-casting Living Flame. Then we'll use our Evoker Staff ability here if we have it. Next, use Dragon Rage, but without Bloodlust, your first Dragon Rage of the fight should be delayed as long as possible without losing a usage during the encounter. After that, we're going to rank 1 empower a Fire Breath, and for the duration of Dragon Rage, we're going to empower our Fire Breath at rank 1 on cooldown. Next, we Shattering Star to apply the damage increase debuff, but during Dragon Rage and Bloodlust, we will hold it until we have enough Essence and Essence Burst to chain 3 Disintegrate casts, or 1 Eternity Surge and 2 Disintegrate casts. Next, we'll tip the scales and instantly Eternity Surge. Then after this, we're going to Disintegrate with Essence Burst. We'll use up all our Essence Burst procs here, but also do note that you can cast Disintegrate again after the 3rd tick of Disintegrate to overlap them without losing any damage. After this, we're going to Disintegrate if Essence is capped or nearing the cap, and then we'll instant cast Living Flame with Burnout to gain Essence Burst if not capped on Essence. However, without the Burnout proc, we will use Azure Strike to gain Essence Burst during Dragon Rage, and at this point, things pretty much repeat during our Dragon Rage. Do make sure though, in the last 2 seconds of our Dragon Rage window, to use Burnout procs or Azure Strike to exit with 2 stacks of Essence Burst. So for single target then, this will be your rotation and priority. Our first priority is to rank 1 Empower Fire Breath on cooldown, as long as the cooldown on Dragon Rage is longer than 10 seconds. Our next priority is to Shattering Star to apply the damage increase debuff, and we want to make sure to do this on cooldown. After that, we're going to empower Eternity Surge at rank 1 on cooldown, as long as the Dragon Rage cooldown is longer than 15 seconds. Next, we'll instant cast Living Flame with a burnout proc, but make sure to avoid capping on Essence and Essence Burst. Our next priority is to spend Essence and Essence Burst on Disintegrates. Again, I'll just mention that you can cast Disintegrate again after the 3rd tick to overlap them without losing any damage. Next, we'll cast Living Flame, then we'll use Azure Strike on the move, and finally, we will use Dragon Rage when Fire Breath and Eternity Surge are ready, or if the fight has less than 30 seconds left. In AoE scenarios or Mythic Plus, our rotation priority will be different. So our first priority is to always try and carry Charge Blast stacks into a fresh pool. Then we're going to use Dragon Rage with stacks of Charge Blast depending on the length of the pool. It can be worthwhile to hold it until we have 18 plus stacks of Charge Blast. Our next priority is going to be Fire Breathing on cooldown. Our next priority is going to be Deep Breathing at 2 or more targets, but we want to delay our first use when the lowest target reaches 30% or less health, so we get the max value out of our mastery. After that, we're going to empower Eternity Surge on cooldown. The empower level will depend on the number of targets within 12 yards of our target. If we're using Eternity Span, we'll use rank 2 for 3 to 4 targets, then we'll use rank 3 for 5 to 6 targets, and for 7 or more targets, we'll use rank 4. Next, we're going to use instant cast Living Flame with Burnout and Leaping Flames if Essence Burst is not capped at 2 stacks. But during our Dragon Rage, we want to make sure to spend all Essence Burst and Essence to give yourself time to avoid capping, because Leaping Flames will provide 2 Essence Burst. Our next priority is to use Pyre in AoE. At 3 targets, we'll spend Essence Burst and Essence on Pyre full time. If we don't have 16 Charge Blast stacks, then we'll use Essence Burst and Essence on Disintegrate at 2 targets. At 3 or less targets, we'll use instant cast Living Flames with Burnouts, and at 3 or more targets, we'll cast Azure Strike with Protracted Talons. When Dragon Rage is available in less than 10 seconds, we'll stop casting Pyre. For 3 or more targets, always build to 18 plus stacks of Charge Blast for your Dragon Rage window. Next, when the pool is finishing, fully empower Fire Breath to increase the upfront damage at the cost of damage over time. Then we're going to avoid casting Living Flame to save Leaping Flames for the next pool, and also avoid casting Pyre to save Charge Blast for the next pool so we can go in with max stacks. On to stats then. As always, if you're ever confused if a piece of gear is an upgrade, I would always recommend you to sim your character first. That being said though, Devastation Evokers primarily favour intellect and mastery. Note that our mastery scales down linearly, so when an enemy is at 100% health, we will get the full value, then when the target is at 50% health, the value will be halved. Haste and Critical Strike are our next best secondary stats, with Haste generally pulling ahead slightly with the Causality talent. After this, Versatility is our least favoured secondary stat. As far as the best enchants go for the Devastation Evoker, on your weapon you're going to want to put Sophic Devotion. For the cloak, we're going to put Homebound Speed. Chest, we're going to go for Waking Stats. Braces, Devotion of Speed. Legs, we're going to put on the Frozen Spell Thread. Boots will run Plain Runner's Breeze. And finally, for your rings, you'll run the Devotion of Mastery. Overall, your best file is going to be the File of Elemental Chaos, though in harder content you may want to run File of Tepid Versatility for a more consistent buff, but also providing you with some damage reduction. Elemental Potion of Power is your DPS potion of choice, with Refreshing Healing Potion being your best healing potion. For your weapon buffs, Devastation Evokers will use Howling Rune for the haste buff, but sometimes crit can be preferred to haste, so then you'll be using a Buzzing Rune. Ideally, you'd want to consume a Feast for the intellect buff, but Sizzling Seafood Medley are a good backup as some personal food. For gems, you'll want to use one Skillful Limited Diamond as your Primalist gem, and then fill your other gems with Keen Netherite, but again, I would always recommend simming. Overall, Evokers are a great DPS pick that are arguably one of the most mobile range classes in the game. They excel mainly in burst AoE situations, especially due to their mastery because most of their damage is all front loaded, but being a hybrid as well, they bring some really nice utility in the form of Expunge, Cauterizing Flame, Zephyr and Oppressing Roar, making them a true force in Mythic Plus content. Unfortunately, they are quite squishy with only one personal defensive cooldown, and also suffer from a 25-yard max range, which does take some getting used to. It is also a relatively simple class to play, but like all specs in WoW, there is lots to min-max, and I guarantee you will have an absolute blast on this spec. Once again, if you did like this video and it helped you or a friend out, then please drop a like down below and also subscribe to your boy. And until next time, I'll catch you guys later.